Yo, yo, yo. Yo, it's HERR Benji, so just live streaming. Now, this is session 10, and I've seen in my previous 9 sessions an extremely low rate of viewership. It's fair to say I'm invisible to the kind of internet YouTube universe, and no one is interested in what I have to say. It's funny though, because if I email some very, I would say, politically sensitive China watchers that I follow. So the reason they're politically sensitive is because the Chinese government spies on, all of their business, the emails they get, everything, and they just seem to have woken up to that in the last few weeks. But I have to explain something, because there's a lot of paranoid, crazy people in my family, and often on my blog I mention my nickname for my brother is Joseph Stalin. So there's a reason for that, though. So let me give you an example. Now my entire family's dead except for my immediate sister Trish, and she's always hated me. She's always been cruel and mean to me her entire life. Just a horrible person, I would say. And the only one time she's ever praised me in for my conduct, in my you know adult life, was when I was working closely under a very important senior official within the Chinese Communist Party. So when I didn't tell her that's who I was working for, but I just told her, about my work situation. I'm in China. I'm, working at a 4-star hotel resort, just teaching the little kiddies. And it's the only time she's ever said anything positive. And even then, she said it her tone was like a reluctant, if she's ever tried to be nice to me, she's just come across as acting like a granny, which is odd for her to see. But maybe she died very old in her lifetime before, so she's prone to act like a granny. I can make allowances for that. At least sometimes, yeah, she's tried to be nice to me, but there's so many times where she's viciously, verbally assaulted me that, just so much venom and spite. It's just I don't even want to talk to her now. I've got one of my best friends is a lawyer to talk to her, and because we have to sort out our mother's estate, and we um you know she was I discovered my sister's one of her friends or carers, actually, when she was 14 years old. She left home. She had a carer, and then um I discovered who that was, by making some representations to my sisters, like as if they weren't from me, or they were from me, but they wouldn't be from me in a way that she could perceive as being me, because she just has a very low opinion of me. She can't see anything good in me or anything intelligent, I guess. And she's just a hater, just an enemy, And this is going to tie back to China soon, because I'm going to talk about China soon. Or I already am talking about China in my funny way, but anyway, one of my best friends that actually I met in China, communist China, she's a lawyer from South Africa. She's now contacted my sister's foster carer from when she was 14, that I discovered who it was, and from my sister by making some representations to her. Anyway, yeah, so we're sorting out the family estate. It's so complicated. Even though my friend's a lawyer, she's not. I think she might not technically be registered at the moment in Victoria State, although she can be. She might be. She brought her law degree from South Africa to New Zealand, then from New Zealand to Victoria, and I met her in between South Africa and New Zealand in China, you know, and that's how our paths crossed, I mean, yeah, life's a complicated dance of sophisticated calculus, isn't it? So, um, but yeah, she's helping me with the estate. That's great. So I don't know if the China watchers I follow, which is New Tang Dynasty. It's NTD News. Now they got this very pretty newsreader there, Tiffany. Sometimes she talks with Josh, who's from Crossroads. He's got his own little show there from the Epoch Times, and they're all so closely aligned in their thinking that it's obvious they sometimes appear on each other's shows, and I'm not in a position to appear on anyone's show because I don't have any viewership, which is that's my reality. So, um, but they being from the West, and then not from like a totalitarian family like I was, like if you can imagine, like the way I describe my family to someone that doesn't know me is imagine like your father's Napoleon, your brother's Joseph Stalin, your mum's Queen Victoria, um, but she's gone nuts because like there's no one there to worship her and she doesn't have a pot to piss in, you know, you know, and your sister's like a angry, spiteful Cleopatra. That's an accurate description of my family. That'll give you a good idea, you know. So so let me explain like where I come from, like because I guess I'm just I was like everyone was white, when I was a kid, and I was the first immigrant in town, really, but on a trajectory of bustling growth, massive growth. So I might have been like the first kind of first generation Australian in my group of my classes I went to when I was a very young kid, but it wasn't long before just hundreds and thousands were coming. So, I think I was on the cutting edge of a certain massive stream of immigration. Like when I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old, the population show was only 16 million. And when I was 4 years old, Aborigines had only even been allowed to be a citizen for only 13 years prior to that. Before that, they couldn't even be a citizen. We actually had Aborigines at my school, and racially, I'm so closely related to the Celtic race because there's a lot of Celtic blood in northern Spain, where like half of my family's from. The other half's from northern Spain as well, but just not such a Celtic place. And yeah, I don't feel very racially isolated from the English race, or subsidiary races like related races like the Irish race and the Scottish race. So whatever. So what's my point? I'm an immigrant. So yeah, I was an immigrant in China. My sister's like, "Well done, you finally got a proper, you know, job or stuff." I was working for this very high level Communist Party caterer. Now, how I know she was a high level, apart from, she looked rich. She was always getting around in her golf pants. I mean, she took me for a ride one time, in her black BMW. In those days, in 2005, you'd only have a black BMW or a black Mercedes, like new model car, if you're a high level in the Communist Party. You could see that on the streets. They're just like shitty taxi cabs. They're all like little shitty $2,000 beat up Corollas. There weren't any new. You wonder where the new ones were. But they just drive them so quickly they'd get worn out, and it'd be little tuk-tuk motorbike taxis. And in those days, not many people had cars. It's like you could choose between a second child or a car, but most people didn't need it. You couldn't make much money. Most of the people couldn't make much money. That they were talking 15 years ago in China. A doctor would make like 1,000 renminbi a month, but the foreign experts, anyone that went there to teach English, would make maybe, I don't know, could make, or maybe they would make 2,000 renminbi a doctor, and a foreigner could make quadruple or 5 times that back then, which was still not much money. It's like only like, I don't know, $1,000 American a month or something. The thing about that money in China is that you can bank it all because the cost of living in China is so low. It's pretty amazing, um, how they can do that. I guess, yeah, when you scrap standards, you just gotta hope no one dumped battery acid in your in your fruit juice to save money, because that actually happens in China. Like, but yeah, I guess they'd realize, oh, we can't pollute the food chain with the foreigners are here, we'll get in trouble or something. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to go off on tangents, but I just want to make this point, which I feel is a very important point. All right. Um, First of all, I wanted to say I only found out NTD stands for New Tang Dynasty TV channel because they arrested a police officer in New York City who was pretending to be an oppressed Tibetan, and he was actually a Chinese spy. And NTD asked him, like late last year, did he want to have an interview with them? And he thought, that's so compromising. Instead of just giving them the interview and making him, even look more hidden as a spy, he's like, let me ask my boss. And the people from NTD that I follow, like Tiffany, and all the people, all the journalists there, they they thought he meant the New York Police Department. He'll ask his boss there, but he he goes to the Chinese embassy to ask his handler there, and somehow the American police, they managed to record it all, probably over his phone. They probably got a warrant from a judge there in New York City. They probably thought he was fishy. He probably, I don't know how they cottoned on, but because he played the immigrant card. So if you go to America and you're from Bulgaria and you say, "Oh yeah, I'm a gypsy, I get oppressed," they'll give you everything. All these bleeding heart liberals, and there's so many people that exploit that shit. They're just like, I'm one of the most oppressed people I've ever known. I've had nothing but suffering and challenges my whole life, and people in America, they just see me and they're like, "Yeah, surfy dude, man, life's a party, bro." You know, they don't understand. Like I even had one of these hardcore ghetto niggers when I was living at the homeless shelter in LA with all the ghetto niggers, and that's what they call each other, niggers. Um, and he's like, "Yo, man, how come you look like you're sitting at the beach?" And I was just waiting for a bus or something. But that's actually because I was quite happy to be in LA, because that's the beauty of immigration. If you've suffered, like I've suffered a lot here in Sydney, it's not necessarily good for me to be here, because everything's just a reminder of a terrible, bleak history. But if I go to America, I never trigger like that. I just have my sense of having overcome, bleak for me personally. But if someone else comes from somewhere else, where they had their bad memories over there, and then they come here and everything looks shiny and new, then yeah, they might like it. I don't know, but I just remember I left. Yeah, well, that's the only reason I knew NTD stood for New Detectives, because it came out in the secret police recordings of that New York City police officer that was actually a spy for China. That's what NTD stands for. So that's how I found out. So, but I'm going to speak now to the naivety in this generation of Americans that it's still there now. You see, like this Joshua Phillips, who I admire his ability as a journalist and everything, but I just think um, he would have been pretty naive as to to think the government in China wasn't spying on him or whatever. Um, like constantly, like all his emails or even his text messages from his girlfriend or whatever. I'm sure he's heavily surveilled by the Communist Party in China. And the other one there, what's his name, Chris Chappell, and you know. But I remember, yeah, I left that job in China with that high level communist level Chinese lady, because I was having some issues with a couple of my students from Singapore, from Philippines, and just balancing the group of kids I was supposed to manage was linguistically very tricky, because I had 3 kids that could speak English quite well, but then I had like 6, 7, 8 kids that couldn't speak any English. One of them now would speak perfect English because he's a US citizen even back then, but in those days he couldn't speak any English. Now he's, what, 22 years old now, living in Texas probably. I don't know, maybe his parents are spies too. I don't really know, it's not my business. But um, so I left that job anyway, yeah, because I was having some butting heads there with this little 8-year-old girl, and I told her like she was silly or being silly or acting silly or stupid or something like that, and she found that too abrasive, and then her mum made a complaint, and my boss, that was the high level Communist Party lady, she's like, "Oh, you're not allowed to insult the student," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, so what do you want to do? She's like, you have to write an apology. And I'm like, all right, write an apology. She's like, you can still keep the job if you want. It's okay. I'm like, no, I'm going to New York. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I've already bought a ticket. She's like, can I see? I'm like, okay. So I went upstairs to my hotel room because it was all this big 4-star hotel, right? My hotel room, it was me and the American guy, Rob. Um, that he was from a military family, but I think like he had no dad or something. He was one of these kids from a divorced family that never had a dad. He looked like that to me, and from a military family. Like maybe his mum was in the military or something. I never asked him about his dad. I just actually I think I read it off his aura that what I'm telling you about his parents got divorced. So he showed me a picture of his mum. I don't think. Um, I asked him anything about his dad. I had an issue with him one time. He's like, "Oh, that's gay. That's gay." Because in those days, Americans were just in their 20s. Even probably now they're the same way. They just want to see how many people they can have sex with before they get married, like in their 20s. And then they just say, "Oh, that's gay," like 50 times a day. It's like, very very shallow behavior. And he was saying that to me one day. He's like, "Oh, that's gay." I call him up on the phone. I'm like, bro, I don't want to hear you saying. He was in his room at the time because they called his room phone, and I was at the other end of the hallway of the atrium. Actually, it was like a 4-star hotel. It was magnificent, and the atrium. I mean, must have been 20 meters long, and I was at the other end of it. And I called from my room to his room. I'm like, bro, I don't want to hear. And I didn't think at the time that they'd be tapping the phones, but because of the result of this, what happened after this conversation, I thought, oh yeah, maybe they were listening to my phone calls. Like, because you got to understand with tapping and Chinese surveillance too, like the cost of labor is very low in China, and the Chinese people are just playful in general, and they're just probably curious. So it's like if an alien comes here from a different planet, they'll be curious about humans. Chinese are curious about, apart from whatever you know directives they have from their leadership, they'll might find it interesting just to spy on foreigners' communications just out of a sense of curiosity. So, I didn't think anyone was listening on my phone calls. I was talking to one of my friends in Spain about it, and he's like, as if they don't have anything better to do with their time. And I thought, yeah, it sounds about right. But I call up Robert at the other end of the hallway. We're working for this big shot lady in the Communist Party, just teaching little kids there. Robert had like the 5-year-old kids. I had like the 7-year-old kids. I'm like, Robert, bro, I don't want to hear you telling me I'm gay or everything's gay or what I'm doing's gay. I don't want to hear it, bro. It's like it's not appropriate. And he's like, oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry, man. That's just how we talk back in America. It's like, well, we're not back in America, bitch. Because it's like fucking. I didn't have a U.S. passport, and you better watch out. I might start World War III on your country, just because like I didn't have a U.S. passport, bro. So it's like he's like, okay, bro, no worries, just don't say gay, right? And I'm like, yeah, that works. So then after that, I got moved down right next to his room to the room next to his room, and it took me a few like I don't know, 12 years or something, 13 years to think, oh, maybe that's because someone was listening to that conversation and thought maybe they should move me next to his room or something. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was a weird, funny situation because I had this student that I just mentioned, that little 8-year-old girl, and one of the reasons she was pissing me off was because she was telling me that I was gay, right? She's like, Mr. Benji, are you gay? And this is some bullshit that I think everyone puts up with in their 20s, if they don't want to stack up a lot of money, and, you know, I don't know, just kind of let themselves be dominated by some lady, which is inevitable at some point. You're going to end up being dominated by some lady if you're a dude. I mean, unless I guess you're gay, then you can just, you know, you, I don't know, you have female girlfriends. Like I had a female girlfriend back in those days. I wouldn't have sex with her because she wasn't good. Like she wasn't hot. But I think her sex life is very active. She's always telling me about all these American like Air Force dude she was having sex with and how they'd carry on in bed. Oh, Nicole. I'm like, really, bitch? You're fucking not real good looking. Like, I don't know how you can get so much, so much sex, but I was very conservative though, in those days. So like, even like one of my buddies said, go get a massage or something like a rub and tug, and I wouldn't have any of it because I was just very conservative. I was just like, fuck, just go jack off twice a week, 15 minutes each time, over and done with. For me, it was like taking a dump, and then I didn't really think about sex at all outside of that. So um, I mean, I just had like, I felt like my perception of the world, the universe was immense, and I didn't need um, any kind of women in my life. But then because of that girl was pestering me, I ended up banging some Chinese girl a bit, and I think Robert liked that too. That he saw I got laid, and he comes over to my room next door from his room, and he's like, "Here, me and my girlfriend made this. Do you want to try it?" It's like it turned out he was big on he was a vegetarian, so he was a nice guy. I liked him. He was a Pisces. He's from Florida, and he was a vegetarian, so as was I at the time as well, actually. And I'd quit smoking in those days as well. Um, I started up again in Virginia a few months later because my buddy there, Drew, he offered me a cigar, and I just thought I could have a puff on a cigar and not get re-addicted, but I was wrong. But if you're a proper cigar smoker, you should be able to just kind of not inhale, but just let the smoke linger in your mouth and then kind of blow it out, but not really inhale it into the lungs. I mean, I heard that's the culture of it by someone I knew once this dude I'm telling you about, he lived within seeing distance of Windsor Castle. It was pretty, I banged my American girlfriend there once when I was with her. We went to their house and you could see Windsor Castle from there. It's pretty amazing. That was in Eton. Um, But yeah, so I was just started banging this Chinese girl there in Guangzhou, and then Robert's like, "Oh yeah, Ben's getting laid. That's good. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I was happy not to get laid. You know, and I mean, why does this 8-year-old student I'm giving her classes? Why does she give a shit if I gay or not? Who gives a shit? Like, but I guess you just annoy people, especially women get annoyed by men the way men act, or I guess in this case, it was for me. It was surprising this place in this case that an 8-year-old girl could give a shit how I was acting. Like, but this girl was so kind of brainwashed by like American TV. Like she was always fucking rattling on about Britney Spears. This girl, that was her god. Yeah. And I mean, I was watching MTV in those days at my hotel. They would have like Gwen Stefani and that toxic song on High Revolution. But yeah, these two Filipino girls were just, the other one's name was Zara, which is it turns out that's my daughter's name now. Um, but yeah, they just were too much with the MTV and Filipinos, like they want to be Americans and that, and yeah, so it was annoying me because I was really enjoying the Chinese culture as well. In Chinese culture, the mentality is a lot different. It's more like passive. You're passive, and you're not getting emotional. Like you're staying calm. You know, and yeah, things are very different. The Chinese mentality is a lot more different to the Western mentality. Not really. They're not the same. They're not the same. Like Americans are very outspoken, very bombastic. But I went in from China to America because I quit that job, because I couldn't. I was sick of dealing with those girls, and I felt like going to America anyway. So I just went and um, just some real fucking losers in America. Like I was on the bus going to like in the South somewhere, and I'll skip that story. But look, I mean, what I'm saying, but there I was about to bitch on dummies in the South, but anyone in the North, like in New York City, would do the same, would bitch about those same people, you know. That's not like an anti-American thing. That's just a thing going on within America. But one thing I noticed when I'd be riding around the subway in New York City, because I went to live in New York City for like half a year, and I'd get around the subway a lot. From when I went from Guangzhou, and uh, like I'd be in the subway in New York City, and I'd be reading because I'm always reading the media, because I like to read the latest media. I like to be informed, and I'm just like, this story was break. This was before Edward Snowden. The story was breaking. I don't know who broke it, about this surveillance state that had cropped up after 9/11, Department of Homeland Security, and all the money they'd spent building the supercomputers, and they had these really super, like, my opinion of the American media is that they're dumb. Like, um, how can I qualify that? Like, there may be certain situations where that's not applicable, like where they might demonstrate excellent education at Harvard or wherever they went, and great insight. So I'm not saying that's a blanket one size fits all statement, but when I say they're dumb, well, this is what the point I'm trying to speak to. Like, if you didn't feel like you were raised in a totalitarian state like I do, even though supposedly I'm from a democracy, but there wasn't much democracy for me. I just get punched in the face by my brother. Some dumbass at school called me a wog. That was, meant to help, getting punched in the face all the time by my brother. No one was really defending any of my rights. I was being oppressed. And my family life was horrendous. Like, my mum would have to go to a mental hospital. I'd be left alone. I'd have to cook all my food. Even if my mum wasn't in the mental hospital, she wouldn't do anything for me. I was alone. I had to wash all my clothes myself. Like, everyone in my family hated each other. No one loved anyone. It was horrible, um, so living between China and America, in those days I'm referring to, was pleasant for me. Like, everyone, I just felt like I just could vibrate love to almost everyone I dealt with. Sometimes I was a real prick to certain people, the same way I had been treated like a piece of shit, since early on in life. Like, there was this bank teller in China that I think she was trying to rip me off. I'm like, fuck you, I'm not going to pay you an extra fucking £100 for this shit. You told me the price for the transfer was £80 or whatever. Now you want another fucking £100 or $100? It's not going to happen. And the manager comes in, it's like, if you not give her the money, she comes out of her pay. And they're doing the same thing to me somewhere else in China. That was before the job with the big Communist Party lady. The guy was like, "Oh, you have to give the. We don't have money to pay the teachers at the school. All the teachers go on strike now." Yeah, I think really what happened was that they were jealous. They found out I was making 1,000 American bucks a month, and they're making, like, $200-300 a month, or not even that, like $100 a month. They all got jealous, and they cooked up some scheme to try to get me to donate all my salary to them. And I'm just like, no, that's not going to happen, bitches. Like, when I had to put my foot down in China, I did. But yeah, I just feel sorry for people that really getting tortured over there, and, like, murdered for their organs and shit. Like, yeah, I never saw that when I was there, but it's kind of sad, you know. I mean, it's sad to think of the people that, like, I had a student in China. I think this is after I lived in New York. Yeah, no, I left New York. I was 6 months in New York. I'm like, yeah, democracy's boring. Give me China. And it's like, I go back to China, but I was in this kind of isolated school about an hour out of Beijing, and I had this one student. He's like, I got to write a paper, and they don't encourage, like, creativity in China. The kids, the kid's paper was like, if I have a dog, I will be so happy. I will bash it every day. It's like, I looked at the kid and I'm like, oh, this kid's for real. And he was all smiling, like it was a funny joke. But I'm like, no, you would bash a dog every day. You're bad. You're bad. He was, oh yeah. I can still see you smile now. Oh, that's horrible. Yeah. You gotta understand too, like, when you spend time with Americans, like, you realize, like, they're pretty decent people, like, I mean, and this speaks to how China's trying to ensnare them with drugs too, because Chinese people, a lot of them are really scummy, and like, like that kid, they'll beat their dog, they'll eat their dog, they're just scummy. And if you ever deal with people from like, say, my favorite bellwether state in America is Virginia, right? And so even though I love California or whatever, or I'd like to go to here or there, I'll just say Virginia is my bellwether state. So it's not doesn't represent all Americans, but it's kind of almost like a bellwether. They might vote Democrat, they might vote Republican. The people there are great. If you go to Virginia, like you don't bash your dog, for fun, and then like, I mean, my brother, he used to punch me like once a month at least in the face. Starting from when I was like 8 years old till when 8 years later I knocked his tooth out. And then I guess he did some calculating and he figured I don't hit Ben anymore because, maybe he didn't want to pay for more teeth replacements, or he didn't want to escalate to our father. So when I think he realized after I knocked his tooth out, you know, that our father never got wind of it, so he wouldn't reflect badly on his father. So I think he actually respected that. So, but yeah, I knocked his tooth out one time. But that's why, because he's been punching me in the face since I was like 8, 9 years old for like 7 years nonstop, and then headbutting me and spitting on me and really disgusting. Um, yeah, and he was prone to torture pets sometimes too. I noticed that, and yeah, that's a really hard thing to watch. That like that's not my favorite event. Apparently, there's this thing you can tap your finger and watch it when you're remembering a traumatic event, and then it'll help your brain rewire or something. I'm trying to do it now, but I can see him torturing that cat. Yeah, it's not pretty. It's not a good memory. So, yeah, I said I had a totalitarian upbringing. So I left my boss there, from communist China when I was working out from Florida. I've gone to the subway of New York, and I always like to read the media. No matter what's going on, I try to read the media most of the time. There might be some stages of my life where I abstain from that, but generally that holds true. I always try to keep up. And so when I said these American journalists were dumb, what I meant was in those days in 2005, and generally speaking, they never had a concept of um, the totalitarian internet, uh, Big Brother is watching you kind of state. That's the state we live in now because the technology is so advanced and your phone can spy on you. So, um, especially in China, but really anywhere. And so in those days, we all had dinky phones in 2005. Your phone couldn't spy on you in those days because you didn't have the computing power. But I was always educated by my father to understand electronics and computers. We always had the latest cutting edge technology computer. We constantly re-updated every year. My father would just kind of steal them from work, and I knew how to program. I knew about Moore's law. I worked with Microsoft when I was 19 years old. I read Bill Gates' book. I understand. I've always understood what the most modern technology could do. My father actually was part of a team that would track the Voyager and the NASA space shuttle launches from Australia to help the American government. From the Australian nationalized phone company in those days. That's what they did. My father was part of that team. Apparently, that tracked those space shuttles going up and the Voyagers and stuff. But that would only be like 1 week a year that they get involved in that because that wasn't like their everyday thing. The shuttle would just go up maybe once or twice a year, and with the Voyager they'd only be able to track it at certain times, So he if he had to do that, yeah, he went away for like a week or something to near Canberra to a space tracking center. Um, so coming back to that time in the subway in New York, though, I read this article, and they'll break in the story about the surveillance state and how the NSA and Department of Homeland Security were just kind of could listen to anyone's phone call. And in 2005, you wouldn't even then have the technical ability, but now they have the technical ability now in the American surveillance state. And normally, when you say surveillance state, you think China, 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 but America has a very sophisticated surveillance state. Edward Snowden, revealed a lot of that, and now the computer control every single phone call that's made, even when you maybe potentially if you're not even on the phone. So if I say now terrorism, terrorism, bomb, bomb, make a bomb, fertilizer, bomb, make bomb, fertilizer, fertilizer, bomb, petrol, petrol, terrorism. Like if I just say those words, that could immediately red flag a computer program that's just set to troll everything that's going out there on the internet or over your phone, even if your phone's switched off. In which case, it could red flag some person that you know, at part of the Big Brother surveillance state that's watching that. So in 2005, when this story started to break, I just thought, are these people for real? Like, what fucking century are they living in? Like, because I guess I don't know. I always felt like my big brother was like Joseph Stalin, you know, for a long time, you know, and so you could just, you know, like you'd have to be ready to block a punch, put your hands up quick so you couldn't get punched in the ear or something, like, because he was always coming to punch me. So when those stories broke, I'm just like, yeah, what do you expect, bitches? You know what I mean? Like, you know, so it didn't seem very surprising to me. And they just look, a lot of these Americans, they look to me like they never did it tough, they always had it easy, like, especially like the white ones, they to just go to college and it's all a big party, how many times they can get laid, and it's like, oh yeah, it's all a big joke. I'll marry her. She's good in bed. And then they're so half-assed, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, look, we don't get along now. We had our first fight. We'll just get divorced. And, oh, it's so sad now. I don't get to see my kid. And I better go party and get laid. Like they're just, a lot of them look like dopes to me, and they just got it too easy, you know? Um, that's one criticism. But I did say before they were very decent people, and they treat their dogs incredibly well. They're noble people. They're not just going to get torturing a cat or something. So yeah, I guess I'm divided on where my perception of Americans, but I can tell you with the Chinese, yeah, they're more likely to eat an animal, and would they torture an animal? I don't really know how they slaughter animals in China. Although sometimes they just do it on the street. There's a lot of decent people in China. Um, there's a lot of decent people in China. There's a lot of people, like, one time when I was in New York and I was working with these Croats and an Italian. No, they were all American because they were all like born in America. They could all be like president one day. you know, you know, they were just dopey working class people. And um, but in New York, in Queens, so they're like Yankees, I guess. They didn't talk like dopey Southerners. And New York's very dynamic city with a very dynamic economy, so everyone's very on their game in New York City. They're very sharp. They're pretty sharp. So these guys, even though they were just, you know, like they might not have had incredible educations, like they were like me, they didn't have a lot of education on paper, but they were reasonably smart people. So, and they also were tradesmen, so they were tilers or whatever. Um, I just farted. It's not a trade. So wish it was. I'd be good at that. You'd say now, master of farts. Yeah. So what were they saying? Oh, they hate, like, Chinese people are scumbags. And yeah, I just thought, I didn't like that, because I actually liked um, the people I was working with, that I just mentioned, including those annoying girls from the Philippines. And I liked it. I had just been like 13, 14 months in China. and I'd come to feel a sense of bond, um, and identifying with the China. So I didn't feel like the Chinese people were scumbags back then. I did see scummy things. So like there was this one giant pit. I was like, oh man, it must have been like 50 meters from one end to the other. And you could just they just had these like um, kind of like almost like a rope bridge to walk across it, but I think it was just full of shit. The whole pit was massive. It was just full of shit because you could walk across the thing and then just sit somewhere on the bridge and there'd be a hole there you could shit through. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how true that was, but oh god, I saw some really shitty things in China. Let me put it to you this way: there's a very high level Communist Party member recently. I don't know if it was Li Keqiang or someone, but they were saying that 600 million people of China, so that's almost half of China. So the bottom 600 million people, they live on, and he said the amount of money, I think it was 144 American dollars a month. Okay, so 144 American dollars. Now, they had something similar in America. Now, I don't know the number in America, but I was one of those dudes in America. My entire 18 months in America, my average income every month was $250 in a month. Is that no, in a week? Okay, but that's still very little money. $250 American a week. It's hard to even know how. I mean, in New York, so expensive. I had to pay from my savings. I couldn't afford because I lived in a really nice neighborhood in New York. I lived in Forest Hills in a it's expensive neighborhood. I could just. I was only earning $250 a week. And even like some dudes I work with, they're like, "Why don't you work as a bartender? You could be making like $2,000 a week in tips. This is, like that. Yeah. I mean, I was only earning 250 a week, but I wanted to be a team player, and like I'm Spanish and I'm fluent in Spanish. So if I want to be a team player in America, um, there's a good chance I'll end up talking in Spanish. So once I start working with Mexicans, I'll be earning on their pay grade. You know what I'm saying? So, um, yeah, whatever the reason was, yeah, I mean, it was rare in America to make more than 250 a week, 250 American dollars. So, but there's a lot of people in America like that, and they say that they abolished slavery in America, but they've created this massive slave class of people like I was there that are just kind of not allowed to be working there, and they've just come in from Mexico or Venezuela or something. Then they might not speak any English or very little English, and they're all on this shitty wage, $250 a week. That's what it was 15 years ago. Now that goes a long way in America because the cost of living is low, and if you're in a um, there's a lot of places in America where you can buy a house for like 100,000 American dollars, because most places in America, the real estate and everything's pretty cheap. I mean, you have to find a cheap state to live in. It's probably going to be run by Republicans. Um, yeah, because the Democrats, they tax the shit out of everything. So I don't think the supermarket's that expensive in California, but you end up subsidizing so much bullshit there. Anyway, so um, 144 American dollars a month, which is what the bottom 600 million people in China are on. Um, it's kind of like 250 American dollars a week. That I would say 100 million Americans are on that. Those are similar classes. So in the Marxist-Leninist mindset of the communist Chinese, those two classes would be on an equal footing. But when you have a totalitarian society, you can just say, all right, well, these Tibetans and these, Muslims up in Xinjiang, and they just look ass backwards to me, and they all fucking hate us. They hate Chinese people, and let's fucking throw their asses in jail, make them slaves, we'll take their land. You can do all that shit in communism. It's all fair game. It's all part of Leninism and Marxism. You can just steal. Actually, if you read Karl Marx, I think he describes communism as a specter that's on Europe's um, border. I'm not sure exactly how much in favor of communism Marx would have been. I'd have to read more of his works, but the I guess no one talks much about Stalinism, but Stalin really created the notion of you could just take an entire fucking race of people, like 10 million of them, and just fucking move them to the other side of the country. That's what he used to do. And a lot of the things they're doing now, like this guy that leads China, Xi Jinping, it's kind of Stalinist. It's just like, yeah, well, that race is fucking us up. We'll fuck them up, and it's people like that. People like Stalin. They don't give a shit. If you pick up a pen and make it a command, 10 million people have to go over to the other side of the country. But I'm pretty sure, if Stalin were alive today, he's gonna fucking pay. He's got hell to pay for things like that, because you cannot just attack and oppress people and not expect hell to pay. Like this Xi Jinping, he'll end up, reincarnating in Australia or something, and just he'll be one of those people that just gets drugged up every day, and um, has no friends. Like, well, we had a guy like that at my one high school reunion I went to, because I went to a lot of different high schools, but this one high school I went to, we had a very cool reunion where they rented out this super yacht. Fucking magnificent, on Sydney Harbour. It was so cheap too. I don't know how we got such a good deal, but it was the best fucking yacht you could imagine, and it was really cool just sitting on that yacht. There was one guy on the yacht, and I know because I spent some time with him before that, and he is a really pathetic case. He's like, if you can imagine, who was that guy for the Nazis that just Himmler? Himmler. Can you imagine someone like Himmler? You know, I mean, can you imagine Himmler in the afterlife? Honestly, I mean, is he gonna have any friends? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, yeah, there's people out there that they love doing that shit. They love fucking making, 10 million people get thrown in jail. And I mean, in China, they do so much nasty shit because they sterilize the women. So they get the women locked up. And then they got the cattle prod. If you fucking piss them off, they'll hit you with the cattle prod. But then they can just get a needle, jab it into your, I don't know, into the skin surrounding your, like, stomach when you're pregnant. And they can just press down on the plunger, baby dead, baby will be neutralized. And then, they can, it's fucking, they can sterilize you 20 ways from Sunday, even like if you're not pregnant. They sterilize all the women there. It's evil, you don't fucking, that's oppression. You don't do that. You don't sterilize women. That's, you never, you cannot be, yeah, I mean, you cannot be good and yeah, and attack a pregnant woman. You can't do that. I can't think of many situations where you should kill a pregnant woman outright. But if there were one, it should be done swiftly, not just, sterilize her and then make her go through the pain of, like, you know, giving birth to a dead baby that you've just killed, and then, all this suffering. And it's just, I'd really like to appeal to, some of these Chinese people's better halves, within themselves, because I think they're just going down the path, they're going down the dark side, and um, it's not good. It's pretty sweet to this Disney Mulan movie. I mean, how can Disney be so stupid? It's like, how can they just go and, suck the dick of this oppressive uh, regime, that they're doing all this shit I'm talking about Xinjiang, and then they Yeah, I don't know all the facts there of that Mulan movie, but I know something stinks when I get close to it. I just even if I haven't sniffed around to see how much it stinks, I know it's already starting to stink. I want to get away from it, you know. So I'm just saying this because I feel like Chinese people can be better than that, you know, even in a shitty regime, you know, where they don't have proper accountability, you know, where it's just kind of draconian authoritarianism. But so what's Mike Pompeo doing now? Since my last comments on him was only a few days ago, I think since then he's changed his lime-colored tie. He went to some Republican politician invited him to speak in a certain state. Could have been Wisconsin, I'm not sure. And he was just saying, you know, like how it depends on everyone, you know, to counter that because there's a lot of very greedy people in the West. You know, like here, we had these universities here in Australia that were just so greedy. Like they didn't give a shit about anything happening in China or any oppression or anything. They just so that's the only main reason. Um, I can imagine the Chinese wouldn't want to, you know, invent that virus and then spread it all around themselves. Is because obviously, you know, they were doing pretty well actually with their charm offensive around the world. You know, in 2018, 2019, they just seemed to have so many moneyed interests in their pockets. You know, they seem to be really getting a lot of running the shots, you know. So, but now it seems like a lot of people are becoming more aware. But yeah, it's hard to say, you know. Uh, it's hard to say, you know, this Chinese people are kind of wussy. They're not just going to protest for their right to democracy or anything like that in a hurry. Yeah. So it's just like mob rule over there. You know, it's the law of kind of cruelty. You know, it takes over. It's kind of it's pretty cruel. You know, it's really sad what they're doing to some of the minorities they're oppressing. Now it's in Mongolia. They're telling all the Mongolians they're not allowed to speak Mongolian at school. You know, which everyone there is going to go against it, and they said it in the army and that. It's just because they have such a majority of people there, you know. Um, and no one complains about the government what they do. So yeah, you do sometimes you expect the Chinese will teach you something about morality, but um, I don't know if they can teach us anything about morality that we need to know about, you know, because it's all just bullshit. You know, it's like you know put people in jail, oppress people, oppress people, steal their organs, steal their land, oppress people more. It's too much oppression. There's way too much oppression, you know. So yeah, I don't know. And then you get these people that are just so greedy in the West. You know, they just want to make so much money for themselves. You know, like yeah, so it's amazing what just one or two corrupt people can do. How much they can change the system. You know, like we had this lawyer in Victoria State here in Australia. Her name's Nicola Gobbo, and she was a criminal defense lawyer, but she started working hand in glove with the Victorian police, you know, to take down all the bad guys. But by doing that, she did that the wrong way because she went against the attorney-client, you know, assumption of privacy and secrecy, and she'd actually report you know, all the criminal wrongdoing of her clients to the police. So she became like the main uh, kingpin, you know, the mover and shaker there, you know, um, and you, like the police, many people in that situation would think, well, that's good because organized crime's out of control and we need to do anything we can to stop them. So let's just put an end to it. And so I guess that was the mentality. But she's still a dodgy lady. You have to watch a documentary on her or something. Like all her best friends were, you know, high level criminal people in the Victorian underworld. So yeah, um, they did have one lady from like the Communist Party school, university, like they go to some university, the leadership there, the same one, and she's like, Xi Jinping's doing a bad job. He's a naughty boy. She's like an older lady or something. Can't remember what happened to her though. I think she was too highly esteemed by the party. They couldn't really punish her much. But there was one guy. He's like, Xi Jinping's a clown. And so they're like, okay, bitch. They put him in jail for 18 years. You know, he's like 70 years old. So who cares? He could die in jail. In 6 or 7 years. No one gives a shit. It's like, I don't know. These cases, they report them, the China watches I follow report them, but we don't get all the facts like what happens to his money from his estate. Do his kids get it? So the American government, they've come up with this new thing now where if you're from the Communist Party in China, they can put you on a blacklist, but they actually have Communist Party members living in California, that they'll just sit there and pay their Communist Party fees back in China. Like they live permanently in California, they got US passport, and they pay their Communist Party fees back in China, and um, they get a pension from the Chinese government because they're in the Communist Party, so they're entitled to a pension. It's like, well, I would get people like that. I just fucking put a big air balloon, you know, tie it up to them and just float them off into space and say, see you later. Because it's like, well, they don't have any allegiance to anyone, do they? So, you know, yeah, so many rotten bastards out there. You just don't know where to begin. But for me, it really means something, like one of my friends in China, like I've got his wedding photo around somewhere, and he married a very pretty Uyghur lady, and I kept in touch with him, up until I sent him some money about 8 years, just before Xi Jinping started really cracking down that part of China. I was sending a little bit more money, even from Sydney here, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and went to the bank in China in Paramount. I sent him some money. I can still keep in touch with him in those days, but since then, since 2017, they built all these big prisons and throw them all in jail. They can just bust them out under cover of night and across the country and put them in a factory to work as slaves. They do it to their own people in China. They got factories full of slaves everywhere. And the European Union is making so much money selling surveillance equipment to the Chinese government to help them. You know, so I think the European Union has a lot of potential to kind of enforce standards. But this is really going to be a big thing in the next century. Is this whole dynamic of China, America, EU. It's going to be a big thing. And the Xi Jinping, he just come out saying we're going to try and be carbon neutral by 2060. If anyone can do that, it's China. China's the one country in the world that has this top-down leadership that can just say, all right, everyone has to have an electric car, period. And they can do that in China. They can actually set the standard for the world in China with that. They can set the standard for driverless cars, driverless electric cars, driverless helium, hydrogen cars. See, hydrogen is very explosive. That's why they got rid of the Zeppelins. And if you put in a car, you can run a car on water. But if there's an accident, there'll be an explosion. But you can have, if they master the technology for driverless cars, that there's never a car accident because it's always on, perfectly guided on a satellite or whatever. All the cars are driverless, and they all run on hydrogen. Um, they're never going to have an accident. They're never going to explode, and they're all going to run on water. It's going to be so cheap. Just run them on electrolysis. Only really a top-down country like China can do that, but yeah, I mean, China, a society like that, that they're always gonna wanna have slaves, it's like the Roman Empire, you can't get all this shit done unless you have slaves, because you need cheap labor, slave labor, and, like I said, in America, they had all this thing about Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery, but did he abolish slavery? It's like, they have so many working, illegal aliens in America working poor. It's like, did they abolish slavery? I'm not sure if they abolished slavery. So anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about now. It's been an hour.